Ever found yourself talking to yourself, repeating your past to yourself as if it's destined to be your future? Or perhaps you've driven across the city and didn't recall the trip. It's not because you weren't there or it didn't happen. These are just a few examples of dreaming in the waking state. Like the movie Groundhog Day, sleepwalking through reality keeps us trapped in the same stories, feelings, and behaviors, despite our good intentions, self-help books, and spiritual efforts. Welcome to Mind Blind, where we explore how humanity's brilliance has brought us to the brink of extinction and the edge of enlightenment. Humanity has used its intelligence to conquer nature, create tools, and build civilizations. We've become the most successful species on Earth. Yet, we've also become the most dangerous and destructive threat to ourselves and all life. We now live in the Anthropocene, an era defined by human activity reshaping the Earth. Climate change, deforestation, biodiversity loss are symptoms of unconsciousness. We poison our air, rivers, and soil. We've created weapons capable of destroying all of us in a moment. How can we be so intelligent and yet so stupid? The truth is, we know not what we do. Talking to yourself, driving without awareness, confusing the mind with reality, this is unconscious dreaming. The mind grows so loud it drowns out reality. The human dreaming disease is an illness, perhaps the root of many other illnesses. Incessant thinking is exhausting and stressful, and the source of countless interpersonal problems. Most people think constantly, mistaking this for intelligence. Oomph! The mind's virtual reality can be so convincing that we live in it, mistaking mental experiences for real people, real places, and real experiences. We've accepted so many layers of mind-made stories that we've lost touch with reality, with each other, and with ourselves. Our relationships aren't with real people, but with the characters in our minds. Everyone you know has a different version of you in their mind. That's who they interact with, and it's why they all treat you differently, because they see you differently in their minds. Illusion is when the imaginary mind looks real to us. And that's how misunderstandings, arguments, division, and conflicts rise. Nearly 8 billion people are sleepwalking, detached from reality. Blind rages, overreactions, and harmful actions stem from dreaming, not reality. We've fallen asleep in the waking state and are acting on the dream in reality. You know, the tragedy is that our reality is the same. It's the dreams that differ. It's the conflicting stories in our minds that divide us. Dreaming the mind feels bad, driving behaviors that harm each other and the planet. But when the dreaming stops and the unreal stories fall away, what's left? Happiness, peace, love. Because happiness is the natural human state. We often measure intelligence by IQ or EQ, which is emotional intelligence, yet we're oblivious to awareness intelligence, the intelligence that governs all the others. I'm not talking about enlightenment here. That's for another episode. And being awake is not about having the right thoughts. Awareness is not about thinking. It's about being aware of thinking. Delusion is mistaking the false for the real. And the only way that happens is by not being aware of thinking. When we're not aware of the mind and thinking, we are mistaking it for reality. And that's dreaming. Dreaming causes delusion, and awakening cures it. As a species, our scientific intelligence has outpaced our awareness intelligence, and this imbalance is dangerous. When awake, we're intelligent. When dreaming, we're deluded. How do we fall asleep while awake and become so deluded? Have you ever felt something so strongly that you were sure it had to be true, only to find real evidence against it? You see, we have a real emotional experience of the mind's imaginary stories. So we say it feels real, equating strength of a feeling with reality. But there's no necessary correlation between feeling and reality. We feel the imaginary. But when we do, we don't often know it's the imaginary we're feeling. This leads us to confuse the imaginary with reality and to get lost in thought, blinding us to what truly is. Some people have lost their minds, which is why they became very happy, like the spiritual teachers Eckhart Tolle and Byron Katie. I just wish we'd all lose our minds. It reminds me of the lyrics in the song Crazy. I remember, I remember, I remember when I lost my mind. I remember when I lost my mind. There was something so pleasant about that place. Even a pause in thinking can do wonders. It can result in insight beyond the mind. It's actually not rare to experience a pause or loss of mind, but most often the mind returns. That doesn't matter though, because the mind itself is actually not the problem. You may dream at night about being chased by a lion, but when you wake up, what do you have to do about the lion? You see, what really matters is knowing the difference between the imaginary mind and the reality. Children know the difference between imagination and reality. They call it play. They don't use the mind to imagine things that are not fun. As a child, I knew something was wrong with adults. They didn't make sense. And so I didn't want to become one of them. Alas, I failed. I became one of them, mistaking mental stories for reality, like everyone else. Adults mistake the mental stories for reality. They take the mind seriously. But we still have a choice and a chance. Realizing you're dreaming is the beginning of waking up. When I first noticed this, it was shocking. One moment I was happily chopping carrots, the next I was on the floor, bawling. My cat licked my nose, waking me up. I laughed through tears. Can't you see I'm suffering here? I asked him. Of course he did. That's why he came. I didn't see it until he brought me back to my senses. I was suddenly happy and ever so grateful, but I was also disturbed. What the hell was that? What is going on? I was alone. Nobody and nothing did that to me. While I didn't know what that was, I vowed to find out. It wasn't the last time I unconsciously suffered, but it was the first time I became aware of unconscious suffering. It was a turning point. Falling asleep and waking up repeatedly is part of the process of awakening. But I hated falling asleep and then waking up and realizing it. At one point, I remember thinking afterwards, I wish I could go back to ignorance, back to not knowing that this was happening. But honestly, that just wasn't true. Dreaming is being painfully out of control, and this idea was just more dreaming. Ignorance of dreaming isn't bliss, it's blindness. So I began to just be grateful I was awake again and resolved not to fall back into thinking. People go in and out of dreaming all day, unaware of it. Realizing this is the beginning of the end of unconscious dreaming. The awakening process can feel like hell, but it's the dreaming that hurts, not the waking. So as the saying goes, if you're going through hell, don't stop, because an awake human is a peaceful human. When I was a child, I used to sleepwalk. One night, I wandered to the edge of a lake. Someone followed to keep me safe. When I asked why they didn't wake me, they said, it's dangerous to wake a sleepwalker. But sleepwalking is what's dangerous. Humanity is sleepwalking towards the edge, unaware. Each generation has advanced our tools of destruction while also losing further touch with our ability and urgent need to discern the real from the unreal. The longer we dream, the greater the risks of unhappiness, arguments, division, war, destruction, and extinction. It's time to wake up. Not once, not twice, but every time we fall into the stories of the mind. Because the truth is, we literally don't see reality. We don't see the people right in front of us. We don't see the totality of what's going on right here and now. We see what I call the movie in the mind. We have a virtual reality in the mind, which includes thoughts, images, videos, sounds, taste, and smells in the mind. And these are experienced, felt powerfully, especially when we are lost in the mind. The mind is always showing you stories and characters in the mental movie. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll discuss much more about the movie in the mind in a future episode. For now, know that every human being has a movie theater in the mind, and movies can be reruns of what happened in the past or what we fear and imagine will happen in the future. The creative imaginary mind is completely unhinged from reality and is therefore unlimited. The saving grace is that we aren't constantly dreaming. Every movie has a beginning and an end. Although, like in the Groundhog Day movie, we can and do repeatedly experience reruns. It's a turning point when we suddenly stop dreaming, stop experiencing the stories in the mind, and notice both the movie and the reality. You know that experience when you suddenly feel and see things completely differently? Villains become victims in your compassionate eyes and kind, wide open heart? It's a drastic change, yet a fleeting awakening moment as the movie quickly fades and the reality and truth comes into full view and focus. The reality was and is always here, constantly. And all you're left with upon awakening is the memory of the movie that just played. Once you notice what it's like to wake up from dream streaming the mind, then you can begin to recognize what dreaming feels like and what being awake feels like. After that insight, you can begin to notice, recognize, and wake up from dreaming faster. Awake, we see the world as it is, not as we think it is. In that clarity, there's space for peace, love, and joy. Human brilliance has brought us to the pinnacle of success and to the brink of extinction. The solution isn't about fighting with or trying to control the mind. Instead, it lies in recognizing the mind as the mind and recognizing that it's not real. The first step is realizing that there is a movie playing in the mind. By seeing it, we won't be blind to it or blinded by it. When we stop running the movie in the mind and stop believing the false stories, we can finally get real instead. By discovering how the mind works, we gain the ability to master it and wake up beyond it. People are beginning to awaken from both personal and collective dreaming. It's time to accelerate this awakening. We have the intelligence. Now we need to reclaim what was left behind. The only true and highest form of intelligence, awake awareness. It's one of the 5 powers all people possess, but few have recognized. I'll be talking about some of those other powers in Mind Blind because it's time to reclaim reality, to stop dreaming and suffering our dreams, and to start living. This is Mind Blind. You know that voice in your head? It's not just a voice. That's up next.